Hello, everyone, and welcome to Plenty for Everyone. We are so excited to have a special guest on this week's episode. Well, we're so excited to be back with you on the podcast. A lot of news to share that we're not going to do right now because we're both really hungry and we have to eat lunch. So we're going to introduce
Especially
you
me.
to our guest, who's amazing, and then we'll do another episode soon with all the news that we're up to. How does that
Yeah.
sound, Jen?
No, that sounds good. So we today on this episode, we get a chance to hear from Alethea Felton, who we were introduced to over the summer. We were on her podcast, the Power of Transformation podcast. We were introduced to her through our publicist around our book, Leading with Light. And we were so
Hmm.
impacted by her presence and the quality of her listening. And I remember the quality of her questions. I had
Yeah.
such a funny environment when we were recording in July at my in-laws in the garage. And she just had a way. And it really struck my heart and I know made a big impact on us. So we wanted to have her on our podcast and it's so fun to have this conversation with her.
Yeah, and as production cycles would happen, I think this podcast is going to get released before our appearance on her podcast, which was recorded a couple months ago. We're recording this in, say, mid-fall 2024, and it couldn't be more perfectly timed for the time that we're in and the need that we all have for brighter lights around us and optimism around us and so on and so forth. So we wanted to read you a bit of her bio so you just get a sense of what she does, and then we'll let the recording, the interview play. But Alethea Felton is a dynamic motivational speaker, certified holistic transformational coach, founder of Alethea Felton Coaching LLC, seasoned writer, and host of the top 5% ranked show, the Power Transformation Podcast. With over 20 years of experience in the fields of both education and entrepreneurship, Alethea's mission is to help leaders master resilience and transform setbacks into breakthroughs to amplify their influence and success.
Alethea's purpose-driven journey was ignited by her transformative personal experiences, including overcoming severe childhood stuttering, navigating grief due to the death of close loved ones, and managing physical challenges related to living with multiple autoimmune diseases. Even in the past, when her life was on the brink of death, Alethea refused to allow her conditions to define her, but rather she continued thriving beyond her own expectations.
And I'm going to cut in on the bio briefly and just say she's going to share a little bit about her health experiences. And one thing she shared with us that unfortunately did not make the recording is when she was in the hospital, this was like 10 years ago, doctors and nurses would come into her room to hang out on breaks because she just had such an uplifting presence about her, which you will totally hear. It's amazing. Alethea is a sought after speaker. She's delivered transformative keynotes and motivational talks. She's guested on multiple interviews and online shows, and she shows audiences how to embrace resilience, turn adversity into triumph, harness the power of their personal stories to create meaningful change in local communities and throughout the world.
And you'll hear that a bit on a more personal level in the podcast that follows. But a little bit more about Alethea. She's a native of the Hampton Roads area, Virginia, and longtime Washington, D.C. resident. She loves anything related to mermaids. You'll hear us talk about oceans and love of water, tracing genealogy, and a huge part of her enjoyment comes from being a cat mom to Buddy, her playful, cuddly, short-haired American tabby. So I love how she starts off her kind of her way of telling us the roles she plays and what lights her up. And hopefully you'll really get something out of this conversation when you are feeling like you are down in the dumps or you're overcoming something that feels hard. Maybe it's in the past, maybe it's happening to you right now that you can hold on to somebody who has overcome and has chosen to kind of look at life and help others in a way
Mhm.
that's not just fluffy positive, but I think it's real for her. And she talks a little bit about a couple of practical tools you can do
Yeah.
to help you stay present in the moments that you find yourself in. So, as always, right up our alley in terms of leading with light. So,
Yeah.
hopefully, you will enjoy it.
Amazing. And can I just say this as well? We're coming off of 3 or 4 really busy weeks, an incredible group in Park City we hosted, an incredible group of conscious leaders in Seattle that we spent the week with, an incredible different group of conscious leaders we spent the week with in Kiowa. And then this conversation. And how lucky are we, Jen, that we are in communion and community and partnership and work with all of these incredible conscious leaders, including people like you who listen to the podcast. So thanks for spending some time with us and Alethea. And we hope wherever you are, you're shining your light and we're helping you do that.
Yes, so grateful. Thanks for listening. Thanks for sharing. See you soon. We are so excited to be back online with you, Alethea. Welcome. We are so grateful to be in your presence. You left a beautiful imprint on our minds and hearts back in July when we got a chance to be on your podcast, The Power of Transformation, and really was moved by your presence and the quality of your questions. And so excited to have you back and on Plenty for Everyone to explore what's on your mind and heart, what you're up to, and what feels alive in your light today and in the coming weeks and months. So I'll kick it over to Jeff to do a co-welcome, but we're so grateful to be in conversation with you again. Thank you so much for being here.
No, we want to kick it right to you. Thank you, Alethea, for joining us. Power transformation, two of our favorite words embodied in you. So we're
Oh,
so glad that you're here. And it's timely. We're recording this in the fall of 2024. There's a lot of people talking about the amount of change that they feel like they're dealing with personally and that they see in the world around them. And one of the things you talk so much about is your journey and everyone's journey of resilience. So maybe we can start by just hearing a little bit about your journey and how that got you into helping others
mm.
build resilience and find the resilience that's within all of us.
Of course, I am happy to answer that, but I'd like to first thank both of you, Jennifer and Jeff, for just allowing me to be a part of this platform. And just meeting the both of you has been one of the highlights of my year for your
Mm.
warm and welcoming and
Oh,
loving spirit. So it was a joy having you on the Power Transformation podcast. And I'm so happy to be here with you all today. But resilience is a loaded word, and I find personally that a lot of people use it so much now. But in terms of what it means for me, resilience is something that I have had to live with my entire life. So, just a little bit about me, who I am first, as opposed to what I do. But who I am, I'm a daughter, I'm a sister, I'm a cat mom, I'm a partner slash girlfriend of a truly incredible man. And I love the ocean. I love swimming. I love mermaids. I love cooking, tracing genealogy, all of that. And so I grew up on the southeastern part of Virginia. So I grew up by the water, by the ocean, and I've lived in DC proper, directly in Washington, DC for the past 18 years. And I also live in my hometown again as well. But the resilience piece for me, part of my story that I'm very open with, I was born with chronic illness, born with autoimmune disease. I live with both Crohn's disease, which is a gastrointestinal illness. And I also live with a condition called primary sclerosing cholangitis, which is hardening of the bile ducts, which leads to liver failure. I have technically been in what's considered end stage liver failure for many, many years, but the irony is I'm thriving and I'm not sick enough, air quotes, to qualify for a transplant. And that is part of my stories is that although I'm monitored closely, I am 43 years young and literally being born with sickness has been a part of my life, but it has not defined me. So that's the nuts and bolts of my resilience journey is that I've had to be resilient in multiple circumstances.
That's so amazing and hard. Can only imagine just
Mhm,
the constant journey of that, of finding, balance and well-being in the dis-ease and in the
mhm,
discomfort. And um, I think one of the things that you have me curious about is over your lifetime and possibly more recently, how have you found a relationship with your body and your mind? When
mm,
we talk about resilience, so many of us have challenges, physical, mental, emotional. You see so much change happening out in the world today. There's a lot of unrest and anxiety. And so I imagine that people listening have their own condition, right? Whatever that is. Have you found a way to be in relationship with your body's kind of state of health, state of being, and how do you do it mentally? Like, do you have a
mhm,
practice? How do you stay in kind of, I guess, positivity in the
mhm,
resilience, right, of continually overcoming and being courageous and
mhm,
willing to
mhm.
carry on? Maybe you could speak a little bit to that.
Sure, that's an excellent question, and I thank you for asking that. It wasn't until recent years, so I would say if this is 2024 now, I didn't really become aware of that mind-body connection until probably 10 years ago. So in 2014 is when I was introduced to the world of holistic health, where I had just been discharged from a hospital. And I've always been a very active person, social person. And I'll never forget, I was coming out of the hospital and a former colleague of mine, because prior to me going into full time entrepreneurship, I was a public school educator for 20 years. I was a teacher, a school leader, ended in HR, all of that. And I was talking to a former colleague and I told her, I said, I really want a good health coach, but just not a personal trainer, just not someone who's going to tell me how to eat well. And she said, well, my husband is a health coach, and I had forgotten completely about that. So, what happened was when I was discharged from the hospital in 2014, my bedroom at the time was literally set up as a room where I could accept guests, because I was on complete bed rest. I couldn't walk or anything like that. So my friend's husband comes over and then he has this big old binder and he introduces himself as a holistic health coach, and that piqued my interest. And I was like, what is that? And he explained to me about how health is just not what we eat and put on our plate, but it's the mind, body, spirit, and more connection. So that's what started my conscious journey when it came to mind body is I had literally been discharged and this man is telling me about how powerful the mind is, and if we visualize and all of this. So a few years later, I decided to get my holistic health coaching certification so I could learn more about this connection. And Jennifer and Jeff, what I noticed was my entire life, I incorporated mind principles before mindset became a buzzword. So, how did that look like? I remember as a child, my parents did their very best to make sure I lived a normal life. So, although I had these diagnoses, I was still told I can do whatever my heart sets out to do, I can be what I desire to be in life. And I had this uncanny ability to visualize myself as the person that I desired. I acknowledged where I was, but I knew that, okay, if I see it, then it can happen. And over the years, I would write. I love to write. I'm a writer. And so I would write out goals in my life and I would read them. And this was before vision boards and all of that. Then, as I grew older, even during the times that I was in the hospital sick, I would be in that hospital bed and I would just close my eyes and I would envision the life that I wanted, knowing what the lab said, knowing what the test results said, knowing what the doctors said. I just continued to will myself and speaking affirmatively into my life. So if I was not feeling well, if I was in pain, I would say out of my mouth, I am healed and whole. I feel amazing. I am worthy of the greatest life ever, even if in that moment I didn't feel like it, or I knew that's not what it was saying. So the resilience piece with the mind meant that I visualize, and I still do to this day. I create vision books where I have different categories of, okay, this is how I want my life to be. And as a matter of fact, I know that the listeners cannot see it, but this right here is a picture. I'm showing a picture where I have words. It's like a word chart of a flow chart. I did this at the beginning of January of 2023, where I wrote down certain goals that I saw in my mind, wanted, wrote them down. 70% of that is completed. When I started, none of it had even been accomplished.
It's amazing. You're speaking about so many amazing things. There's so many threads you've already put on the table that we need to pull at.
Mhm.
And I want to make sure before I forget, one that I want to pull at before we close is your love of mermaids in the ocean, because you're talking to two mer people here. So that caught my ear way before you started that amazing story. Um, there's a few things you're touching on, things that we talked about on your podcast when you
Mhm.
hosted us, about conscious leadership, the power of intention, the power of affirmation, the power that we have to co-create with the light that's in us, so many things. I want to actually start with something that you said about your parents,
Mhm.
because telling your story, I was thinking, okay, as a young person, we all have labels that are put on us, and then there's the labels that we choose as we become more mature and we become more self-directed. And I was thinking to myself, wow, you must have had people around you who were powerful, who taught you resilience. How how did your parents mentor you? Has that influenced your work in resilience coaching? How they taught you to, how did they navigate kind of you feeling a certain way, or you maybe knowing that you were not in the same place as your other children that you saw, but
Mhm.
also empowering you to feel whole and complete? I'd love for you to just talk more about that.
Of course, they really influenced me so well, Jeff, where, to be quite honest, the majority of the people that I grew up with didn't even know that I had these conditions until I became an adult and started talking about them more publicly. My parents, my Mom and dad are two of the most encouraging, uplifting people that I know. My mom was a former teacher. My dad was a former pastor and psychiatric counselor. And so, with him having that counseling background and my mother having that teaching background, they were both nurturers and still are, still married, still very encouraging to this day. I could tell my parents, okay, mom, dad, I'm going to pack up and go to the moon next week. They would support me as long as I had a plan, if I had the appropriate funds, if I did this. There were no limits to what I could do. They made us very well, us in terms of my sister, me, other people throughout our life that they helped to raise, influence. They poured so much into everybody where my parents always told me to have firm faith, trust God, but also know that I share God's DNA, meaning that God gives me the power within myself to be able to push past any and all obstacles. I don't have to beg God, I don't have to plead with God. It's already inside of me to do what I want to do. And so that's the type of people that my parents have been. Even when I chose to leave my career of 20 years and go into full time entrepreneurship, they trusted me doing that because they've seen time and time again of how I've bounced back. So they are two of the most optimistic, faith filled, supportive people, and I couldn't ask for anything better.
Mm, so
Hmm.
fortunate.
Yeah.
And it's such a reminder of just the the imprint that anybody who believes in us,
Hmm.
Hmm.
what a difference that makes. And it invites us to pass that on, right? I've been very fortunate myself to have a similar dynamic with my family and parents who
Mm.
are my biggest cheerleaders. And just that kind of comes and wants to pour out in my belief in others because I was believed in. And, not everybody is so fortunate in the relationships or their upbringing or their conditions that they have found themselves in. In your work today, in your coaching and on your podcast and helping so many different people tap into faith or tap
Mm.
into their ability to overcome, their ability to become that core essence of what makes, I think, this, common word of resilience kind of feel so trite. But when you kind of go underneath, it's like the digging deep in those moments that suck, those moments that are really shitty and
Hmm.
hard, and
Mhm.
the moments where you kind of know that on the positive affirmations and envisioning, and if you've been given those tools, you know what tools to apply. But at the same time, some when you're in it, right?
That's
And
right.
and it's really hard, even if you have those tools, to know how to navigate. What do you find yourself saying, sharing, drawing from when you can relate, I imagine, in those
Sure can.
really personal ways when
Mhm.
people are at their lowest of lows and
Mhm.
are scared and don't know what to hold on to. How do you show up for them or for anybody listening?
Yeah.
What would you say that you can draw on or do draw upon that could help
Mhm.
them?
I literally say, and it's not to be sarcastic, I mean this literally. We often hear in our society of taking things one day at a time. Sometimes doing that is too much for
Right.
people.
Yeah.
And I literally will say, if all you have to do is take it in incremental minutes at a time, do that. So when you feel that you are imploding and that you're going to crumble, look at a clock, look at your watch, look on your laptop, look somewhere and literally say, okay, if the time is 9:05, let me literally just take some breaths and get to 9:10. And once I get to 9:10, let me go on to 9:15. If you have to take it minute by minute and then hour by hour, do that. And it is because it's a practice that I had to incorporate. I don't want to give any listener the idea that I've always been a generally positive, upbeat person, but to keep it totally real and plain, there have been times when I didn't want to wake up. There have been times when I've been angry, and my relationship with God is straight up yelling, fussing, cussing, being mad at God for these circumstances, being depressed in the lowest of the low, and where I literally had to just take a moment and breathe. Pay attention to my breathing. So I tell people in this moment, if you're feeling hopeless, you stuck, you don't know how you're going to get out of it, take a breath. Literally inhale and exhale. Feel the air coming in and out of your body. Oxygen, rather, take in that oxygen, exhale, and literally say, okay, if this is all I can do in these little time chunks, that's what I'm going to do. And I also say, you don't have to have the same faith as I do. However, I encourage people, if you have a table beside you and you have to vent and share and release to that table, let it go to something or someone because it is almost impossible to carry all of this alone.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm.
I love
You-
that.
Mhm.
Love that.
You're pointing to something. I want to link for the listeners what you're pointing to what you shared earlier about learning from your parents that you have this innate, we would say innate well-being or innate
Mhm.
strength or innate courage. And I think what we see in the people that we work with, whether it's aimed at their kids or their significant other, or it's a leader with their team, we think we need to kind of protect people from uncertainty and
Mm.
from things that are scary and from things that they can't control. And when we do that, we're actually telling people they're weak and that
Mm.
they can't count on themselves. And it comes from this place of good intention. You know, we see the people we love or the team members we care for, and we think, okay, we just need to architect this environment for them. But all we're teaching them is that they can't depend on themselves. And so there's this interesting balance that I feel like you're pointing to of being kind with ourselves and kind with the people around us, but also knowing that we don't need to be patronizing to ourselves, that
Nope.
we can ask God for what we want and know that it's somewhere in us. And the question, I guess, in there is we often work with people, I would say, especially in the last year or two, who kind of say things like, I'm fine, but it's all these other people who drive me crazy, right? If it wasn't for everyone around me, I'd be perfectly fine. So, what would you say to someone like that who just maybe is not willing to admit it, but they have this controlling idea in them that if everything else around them goes a certain way and if everyone acts a certain way, then they'll be okay? But we're living through this grand evidence that that's not how it all works. And what do you say to someone like that who's maybe holding on to the world a little tightly?
So earlier this year, actually, I was was it earlier this year? So, oh my goodness, it's already October. The months are meshing. This was over the summer. I worked with someone who didn't necessarily have it to that extreme, but it was something similar. And what I did with that person was I made them take everybody else out of the equation, and I started with a simple, give me 10 things, write down 10 things about yourself that you absolutely love, and 10 things about yourself that you could tweak. I didn't want to say negatives or anything, but tweak. What I mean by that is when a person feels that the world is against them or it's everybody else's fault, I hone in to really get that person to look at themselves because it starts with us. Even if everybody around us is chaotic, dysfunctional, it doesn't mean that their actions have to be a reflection of mine because our responses are our responsibility, nobody else's. So the way that a person reacts to someone else has nothing to do with that person. It is, are you in control of yourself? Are you aware of who you are? Are you aware of where you are currently in the moment? And if you can say, yes, I am, then that is a start to it. Now, if a person just absolutely doesn't want to see it, no matter how many sessions you have, then unfortunately, not to say there's no hope, but that person might not be coachable at that time. It
Yeah.
takes a willingness for the person to say, this is who I am, and this is what I can work on. And even if people agitate me, go back to that question about what is it about them that's causing you to be all over the place or to get out of character? Because at the end of the day, it's really not on them. We are responsible for how we choose to act and react and respond.
Yeah, and it's really timely and it's deep work. Not everybody's
Mhm,
up for it. I think it's much easier to point fingers and blame and judge
mhm.
and see the world as separate. We see that right now heading into the elections. We couldn't be more polarized, and there is
Yes.
righteousness on both sides.
Mhm.
And, and it's scary and uncertain and volatile what is happening out there. But when you peel it back to the point that you're making, and we talk about this in the book, that everybody's a mirror for our light and our shadow. We
Mhm.
cannot see what we're not. We only see what we are, and it works both ways. It works on the good and the admirable positive traits that we admire, and it works on the shit that triggers us and
That's
makes us
right.
mad and blame and shame and judge. That's all within us. And it's
Mhm.
much easier to say than to practice unconditional acceptance of
Yes.
our own wholeness. Wholeness means the light and the dark. And I can tell you from myself, I've been a light seeker my whole life.
Mhm.
So it is, and I've defaulted on the positive side of things so much that it's unconscious habit to, even in my meditations, and I'm doing this psychic training intensive right now.
Mm.
And literally for the last, I don't know, 5 meditations, I'm connecting directly with my guides. It's all positive until the teacher was like, you got some shadow in there too.
Uh-huh.
And the only way I was able to give myself permission that it wasn't so scary, even though analytically, like, I know and own my shit all the time,
That's
but
right.
from a unconscious spiritual standpoint, wow, I just needed that seed to say deeply that my shadow, like, if I really want to become powerful in my light, I have to harness my shadow. It's the only way the light gets birthed, the light gets empowered, is if we can bring unconditional acceptance and neutrality. Like my belief is like the universe, whatever you call the higher light,
Mhm.
God,
Mhm.
in greater intelligence, the divine, it is neutral. It's
Mm.
energy. We put our judgment label, good or
Yeah,
bad, on it. That's a
exactly.
human
I
thing.
understand. Mhm.
So it's just so interesting at this time and place that I think this is deep work. It's personal, it's individual. Not everybody's up for it, but if you are
Mhm.
listening, like this is what's ripe and ready for us to reveal, is becoming more whole in ourselves, finding a way that works for you to do that, whether it's journaling, like you said, whether it's giving your conscious mind a bone. I want to go back as an example of what you
Mhm.
said about the clock, looking at the time.
Yeah.
So it's super practical to get you in the present moment, right? It
Mhm.
also gives your brain a bone to focus on. Our
Mhm.
brain wants to label, understand, judge, make meaning. And so if it's not doing that, or if it is doing that, it allows room for spirit, soul, consciousness, nature, our healing efforts of our body to take centered stage.
That's
But if
right.
our brain is like trying to make sense of things in the moment and judging and making meaning, like it gets in the way. So I
Mhm.
just wanted to point out that what you're talking in that really practical present moment of bringing ourselves back to this minute by looking at the clock, you actually distract your left brain so that your right brain, your intuition, your higher intelligence can access what wants to come through. So,
Indeed.
it-
And if I might add, I love how you talk about how we have to acknowledge our shadows. So although my health journey has been a big part of it, that's not the only area of my life that I've had to be resilient in. There's a lot of things that I've experienced in my life, just like I'm sure everybody. But in talking about that acknowledgement, part of resilience for me, even when it came to romantic relationships, I could not get to a healthy relationship until I acknowledged where was I in the way with even past situations that weren't my best. I had to acknowledge it's very easy
Mm,
to pass judgment or blame on this man or that man, right? For my case. But what I had to acknowledge and part of my wholeness is what was I allowing? What was I not using my voice for? What was I not speaking up? So I had to learn how to bounce back and just not bounce back, but to how not be set back into those past behaviors and patterns. But I could not do that until I acknowledged where I could have made better choices, where I could have spoken up and used my voice. So resilience shows up in so many areas. And once I acknowledged those parts of me that I allowed and did not walk fully in my wholeness and in my worth, then that's when the door opened for me to actually be with the right person and to have a healthy, productive, loving relationship. So, for listeners out there, you might not have experienced health challenges, but we all navigate something. We've all had to go through something, and it's easy to get stuck and not know which way to
mm.
turn. But it does start with who are we first and foremost before anything else.
I love that you just went there, and I love that you went there
Mhm,
based on what you said half an hour ago about the
mhm.
buzzwordiness of resilience, and maybe to address that part of it and address what I loved about what you just said. There has been resilience is a word, just like conscious leadership is a
Yeah.
phrase that is is sometimes overused, and I think
Mhm.
it's kind of gotten co-opted and reduced to mean people hear be more resilient and they think grow a strong backbone. Like resilience is all about strength, and the
Mm,
opposite is frailty. There's a whole nother meaning to resilience that you're pointing to, which is resilience is about being pliable and about being adaptable.
that's
And the
right.
opposite of it is being rigid, is this rigidity. And Jen, I'm thinking about what you said earlier. I think, and I'm happy to say this might just be my own personal need to put on things, but I do think the universe is benevolent. I think
Mhm.
God is benevolent. I think we get confused because we get so rigid, we get so stuck in what we want the outcomes to be that we just miss the amazing benevolence of creation. Like that's the end in and of itself in a lot of ways. We miss that the sun rises and the sun sets. We miss that the leaves change. We want everything to be so stuck in place. And what you're pointing to is a different way of thinking about resilience, which is I'm pliable, I'm adaptable. I allow myself to learn. I allow myself to fail. I allow myself to say, that didn't work the way I wanted it to. And when we can say those things instead of shutting ourselves off from the things that are scary or the people who disagree or the experiences that shame us or that we regret, when we're allowed to be adaptable and learn from our own mistakes and learn from the people around us, we see that everything is architected in a way to help us learn. I think we get stuck though sometimes, and things that aren't what we want or aren't what we wished for, we think are bad. They're not bad. There's just a lesson there that maybe we didn't know that we needed. So I really love that you're pointing to this idea that we all have a pliability. We all have an adaptability within us. And channeling that is one of the superpowers. And it's related to Jen, the superpower you always talk about, which is presence, right? When we can be here in this moment, we can see what we have to learn from the experiences we're in instead of deciding we need to be somewhere else and this thing doesn't have anything to offer me.
Yeah.
Being pliable, being adaptable to the world around us.
I think just to add to that, I think and clarify, as you know, I think I made that statement that the higher light is benevolent. I totally believe that we live in a world of goodness. To clarify, I think energy is neutral.
Mhm,
And
yes.
energy is frequency is neutral. And to make the bridge, I love that you're talking about personal, I'll use your word, Jeff, agency, personal responsibility. I think we've kind of gotten caught up that life happens to us, that it's everybody else's fault, that the success of America, the success of our families is going to be dependent upon who is the next president of the United States. It's total crock of shit, first of all. Nobody is that powerful, right? Like if you even look at the president's position, there's executive orders, but we also have Congress, Senate, and a government that
Mhm,
that needs to change in order for things to also be better. That example, what you're talking about is like the agency to do the check about how am I responding? I like to get it back to the center of your wheel and your drawing of what's at the center.
that's right.
Who do I want to be? And when I am being, is that on or off alignment for what I wa- give myself permission to be and do? Or why am I here? Or is this the kind of person I love to be with myself, for myself, so
Mhm,
that I can mirror that out in relationships? I
mhm,
think it's been a tricky ride where we've kind of lost sight that our power isn't out there. Our power is in here
that's right.
to respond, to be agile, like you're talking about, Jeff, and really be clear and intentional with what's the experience, what's the ride want to be. And it sounds much easier. It is like a constant practice to really think about and consider what if it's not everybody else's fault? Like,
Mhm.
what if, yeah, I was handed circumstances or a health issue or a relationship issue or a family pattern that I'm just starting to see now take root? Like, what if all those things are just the puzzle pieces to get us to see I'm responsible. I can
Mhm.
create the life. I can respond in different ways. And I think that's the power of resiliency when we can take that
Yeah.
power back, that it's not just a muscle rehabbing or an organ getting healthier or a relationship
Mhm.
healing. We're at the center of all of that for ourselves.
Mhm. And I don't think that it matters on the background or the upbringing of a person. It doesn't matter which country you're in. I've heard stories of people who may have been born into dire straits and still transform their lives. So when I had to learn how to remove the excuses from my life. That's how my parents raised me. There weren't time for excuses. It's not to say not to have feelings and to not to acknowledge what's happening, but to know that I can make a decision to do something differently. I don't have to fit the mold of what people think I should be or look like. And so I think that's what's helped me with the health journey, with even experiencing grief, with experiencing a lot of different really challenging times in life, is that I just stay focused, yes, on the present moment because this is what I have, but also knowing how can I let my light shine so that others can be curious as to, okay, how do I get there? And those of us in leadership know, whether it's from entrepreneurial leadership or elsewhere, those of us who are leaders see it all of the time. We may be as creative as the next, but we get stuck sometimes, but do we have to stay there? So that's where I come in, is how to help you transform what is seen as a setback into a breakthrough, because beauty often comes from those very rough patches and spaces. I know it has for me, and I've seen time and time again of where in the dark spaces, in the hard times, that's where the most growth can actually happen, and that is an absolutely beautiful thing.
I love it. I love the messiness you're pointing to and the humanness.
Yeah.
And there's a little
Yeah.
there's a passage in our book where we talk about trying to give up worry and how we used to
Mhm.
joke with each other about giving up worry. And even people now will say, "Do I need to totally give up worry?" And no, you can worry can be like potato chips, it can be like a little junk food for you. And I think
Moderation.
self-pity can be, yeah,
Yeah.
self-pity can be a little bit of junk food. You can use it once in a while, but you
Yeah.
can't make a steady diet of it. Um,
Mhm.
we want to make sure we give you time to talk about where people can find you and your amazing
Oh,
podcast,
okay.
which you're
Thank
100
you.
episodes up on, and they're all worth listening to. I think before we do that, we have to hear about your favorite ocean. I'm going to bring it back to that. Tell us about your love of water and where you like to go. What
My
water would you choose?
Yeah, so I grew up by the Atlantic Ocean, so I can tell you like that, but I do like tropical islands. So honestly, I've never thought of a favorite ocean, Jeff. You have challenged me now to do something else. Anywhere where there's water, I love it. Oceans are my go-to place. So I'm right here in the Virginia Beach area, so I can access that anytime. But even if it's a river, if there's a lake, if there is a resort that has a pond and a stream, anywhere where water is, I love to be. And it just brings me so much calm, clarity, and I like nature in general. Matter of fact, later on, I'm gonna go out and do my run outside in nature. So water, nature, all of that. But I don't have a favorite ocean, so I'll have to think about that one. Yeah.
Lovely.
Mhm.
We share the same. You're speaking our language.
Yeah.
What, where can people find you?
Oh, yes. So I am on social media. I am at LinkedIn, Alethea Felton, ALETHEAFELTON. I'm on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and I have a website, but my website is being updated. But you can check out my website, but also my podcast, The Power Transformation Podcast. The Power Transformation Podcast. It's on all audio platforms. Season 3 will be in December of 2024. And my plan is to also switch over to video as well, but it's audio only for now, and it's on all platforms. Currently, it's ranked in the top 5% of podcasts, which is really, really exciting. And I invite you all to follow, leave comments, feedback, and share it with as many people. I have interviewed some incredible people, and Jen and Jeff are going to be guests very
Mhm.
soon in terms of their episode is going to be shared very, very soon, probably by the time this is released. But yes, I invite you to join me and follow me and send me a message. I'd love to hear from you.
Amazing.
Mhm.
Well, your light exudes from
Yeah.
you,
Thank
Yeah.
and
you.
it's so lovely to be in conversation and to share time and space with you. Grateful to our publicists who kind of connected us way back
Mhm.
around the launch of Leading with Light, our book.
Yes,
And it's been really a privilege to meet people like you and soul sisters would say, just
that's right.
sharing a similar come from and offering out into the world as we're practicing it ourselves. I think, one of the things I'm sure you relate to is whatever we share and teach, it's for first and foremost for ourselves. We become
Hmm.
our own best coach by coaching others, and that's the trick of life. So it's so lovely to be the recipients and to be in conversation of
Mm,
how you articulate and how your authentic kind of journey of overcoming challenges. I love how you don't just keep it in a box related to one component of being.
Hmm.
That, I think that's one thing that we're really seeing resonance of is we're the cross pollination in all areas of
mm,
our life,
mhm,
and how we're naturally born to be resilient, and you can count on that. You don't need instructions. We
mm,
figure it out because we're wired that way.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
thank
Love
you
that.
so much for being with us today, and we so look forward to seeing and talking with you more. And Jeff, I'll let you have the last word.
No, you said it perfectly. Thank you. I was thinking of just your authenticity, but your enthusiasm and the transforming power of optimism is really what
Mm,
I feel in your spirit. It's gotten so trendy and so easy to be
mm,
cynical and to be skeptical. And there's a real need for a different way forward. And I feel your optimism and it makes me optimistic. I feel your
oh,
belief. It
thank
makes
you.
me believe. So thanks for sharing that
Thank
positive
you.
energy with us.
And I appreciate both of you for having me. It is such a joy to connect with you. And yes, what you see is what you get from me. This isn't an act. This is just how I am. I've always been kind of quirky and excited, but I have gone through so much in my life, but I wouldn't trade any of it for anything. And I just
Mm,
encourage both of you to keep using your voice, continue to just spread light, love, and abundance upon everybody. I'm so honored to have met both of you.
mm,
Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you. Thanks all for listening. We will see you on the next episode, but really appreciate you tuning in, and please like, share, and follow us as well. To be continued.
Thanks all. Thanks for tuning in. Join the conversation and learn more. at www.plentyconsulting.com.